I was going to run through our top 10 anti-2010 list to update people. It's a leaflet here. There's a couple of versions of it. One's from Olympic Resistance Network, and this one's from no2010.com. It helps me to go through it because it's a very large-scale industry, the Olympic industry, right? Which, and again, that's thanks to Helen. I think that we kind of got the message that this thing was an industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry. Anyway, the top 10 thing is the first one we have is the colonial and fascist history of the Olympic industry. So when we look into the history of it, we looked at one of the founding members of what's called the modern Olympics was a French baron, Pierre Coubertin, and he used sports. He saw sports as a means of strengthening and advancing colonialism. And there's some very good quotes from him where he says it's a good way of making the colonized people appear like. He's countering this idea that, oh, if the colonized participate in these sports and they win, it might lead to rebellion. And then his thing was, no, it's actually a good thing because it makes them feel like they're victorious and that the Western system works and that they can participate in it. Hitler's 1936 Olympics, the Nazi Olympics, which really helped strengthen the fascist regime in Germany. Another Olympic Games we could look at is the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, where there is at least 300 student protesters were massacred by the government just days before the Olympic Games were to begin. Some estimates are that there was like 1,000 people killed. The IOC had nothing to say about this except to say that the Mexican government had assured the IOC that the games would proceed peacefully and they would not be interrupted. And if you may remember, there's another important thing that happened in Mexico City that may be more well known. Does anybody hazard a guess about what that might be? Yeah, the two black U.S. athletes, they won 100-meter dash or something. They won the gold and silver, and when they got up on the podium, they raised their hands in a Black Power fist salute. And world attention was focused on them, and it's very revealing because of the response from the IOC towards this small political gesture was to use the heaviest sanctions that the IOC could use, which was to strip them of their medals and have them evicted from the games. The second thing we talk about is the No Olympics on Stolen Native Land, and we talk about that because here in BC, you may or may not be aware of, there's virtually no treaties for the sovereign indigenous lands that are here, and this is contrary to the British and Canadian law, which required settler governments and businesses to acquire treaties before any trade or settlement could occur. The third thing we have to talk about on our top 10 list is the ecological destruction that's accompanied this Olympic Games. There's a very large-scale environmental impact that's not really talked about. A little bit is the Sea to Sky Highway, a massive infrastructure expansion that they've done there, almost $1 billion worth. Another aspect of the environmental impact is all the concrete that they're producing to make these venues and highway improvements and stuff and new bridges and that, right? And all this concrete's got to come from somewhere. Where do you think it comes from? It just appears in those big trucks and they mix it up. It comes from the land. And that this construction crazed city is dredging up all the local rivers and wherever they can get gravel and sand. So they're digging up the Fraser River. In 2006, one of these quarry operations killed like 2 million salmon. One of the runs was devastated by this mining of the rivers there. The fourth thing was homelessness, which Helen talked a little bit about. Since 2002, when Vancouver won the bid, we've seen a 370% increase in homelessness. Hundreds of low-income housing has been lost in the downtown east side. Impact on women. One thing that's not really discussed about is the impact of these mega sporting type of events on women. A couple years ago, there was a large football tournament in Germany, and the European Parliament and women's groups began to organize around it to try to raise awareness over there about the impact of these types of events on women. Because what happened was there was a mass explosion in trafficking of women for these games, and there was tens of thousands of women, trafficked women, who were brought in to service this tourist industry, this tourist market. which accompanies these kinds of games, right? And the potential for you know, criminal gangs to organize themselves and try to profit, and one, you know, through drugs and prostitution. And we can see right now in Vancouver this gang war that's going on, where they're fighting for power and territory or whatever they're doing, but they're killing one another. And you can only imagine all the money that's at stake and what it's going to be like in 2010, you know, a year from now. Number 7, 2010 Police State. Right now they're conducting Exercise Silver. The Canadian Forces, the RCMP, the Vancouver Police, all these different police forces and emergency services. There's about 1,000 of them in town, in the city right now, conducting these exercise training. During the 2010, they're expecting to have about 12,500 soldiers and police. Number 8, the massive public debt, which has been very much in the news the last few months with the economic crisis, the decline, and the Olympic Village, which I seen a really good poster of. It's got the headline, you know, Olympic bailout for the, and it said, then someone had stenciled Olympic pillage underneath it. The city is basically on the hook for almost $1 billion for this facility. I don't know if you've been down there and you take a look at it. It's a very, very large condominium complex type of thing they're building down there, right? The Vanlock and them were saying these games are going to cost like $600 million or something like that, and a lot of it's going to be paid for through corporate sponsorship and all that. But as Helen mentioned, they don't factor in all these other costs that are a part of winning the bid, as it was termed back before 2002 when we actually did win the bid, right? Like all these infrastructure projects that the IOC demanded Vanlock and the city say that they were to build them by the time 2010, right? The $1 billion for security, they don't include that in any Vanlock budget, because that's going to be paid for by the federal and provincial governments. Then you got the Vancouver Convention Center, so it's another almost $1 billion for that. The RAV line out to the airport, the SkyTrain thing, which they said, well, we need this for the 2010 Olympics and all that kind of stuff. So that's like $2 billion. The whole cost of it, which was in the Vancouver Sun a couple of weeks ago, a big headline, $6 billion, right? At least $6 billion public debt for the 2010 Olympic Games. Olympic corruption is another aspect of the Olympic industry. All the bribes, the scandals that have hit the IOC. Salt Lake City was one of the biggest ones. Some of those IOC officials were dismissed or quit in disgrace. Corporate invasion is number 10. Now, the corporate invasion is something that accompanies these Olympic industries, because the government and the corporations use them, Olympic leverage they call it, to try, you know, to spotlight an area, to draw in corporate investment. So they come to BC, and what the BC government has done is it's relaxed a lot of taxes and licensing arrangements and stuff. So now it's easier for the corporations to do business in a few different industries like mining, oil and gas, and the ski resort industries are the main ones that they've really targeted. So anyway, with that, thank you for listening to me, and I'd like to thank Helen again, and I'll pass it back to the moderator, I guess. If you look at it.